Will the first Descendant become the next best looter shooter to the likes of Destiny or Warframe? Or will it flop like Outriders and Anthem? That is what we will be analyzing today. What kind of potential the first Descendant carries for the road ahead, and how strong of a contender I believe it could be for other games in the same genre. So be sure to leave me your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below, and if you enjoy the video, leave a like on it as well. The more that you guys like this video and subscribe to my channel, the more this game actually has a real chance to succeed and not die within a year. But without further ado, let's just jump into this. So let's go over what the first Descendant actually is, for those of you who haven't heard of it yet. But also bear in mind that everything I show or talk about in today's video is from a beta, and we don't know when the full release of the game will actually be, so everything in this video is subject to change. And this beta seems like a proper beta, so if you see or hear anything that you don't like in this video about the game, just understand that it might actually change by the time the game gets released. So the first Descendant is a new free-to-play looter shooter being made by Nexon Games on the Unreal Engine. They started to work on this project in spring of 2019, and they have about 150 people working on this game. It's a third-person looter shooter similar to Anthem, Warframe, The Division, and even Outriders. Although, there is no cover system like there was in Outriders or The Division, and there's no flying like there was in Anthem. But you do have a grappling hook that you can use to traverse to various locations. The game also has a wide number of playable classes or characters, otherwise known as Descendants. So if you enjoy any of the games I just listed above, stick around because this could be a game you won't want to miss. In the beta, we had a total of 10 Descendants that we could choose from, all of which were unique in their own ways and offer different playstyles and mechanics the player can learn. Crazy thing though is that in the menus that showed where all the Descendants were, it showed that there was 100 slots for new Descendants in the future. So potentially we could see a constant stream of new characters to play and unlock. And because this game is free to play, we do believe the pay structure of this game to be similar to Warframe or Destiny, with maybe skins or some kind of character, some kind of pay to progress type of thing, some kind of blend of that. The beta also showed us that the game is attempting to give us an actual story with characters, lore, and an overarching purpose behind our character and the world that we find ourselves in. I can't really comment on the true quality of the story because it was only a beta, so it might be subject to change there too. But from what I could gather, the story seemed very similar to a lot of other sci-fi looter shooters, and just media as a whole. You are the sole protector of the last city of humans, you have to protect them from entities spreading corruption everywhere, and as you journey into the game, you will find out more about the ancient people of the past, and there's also a big bad guy who will stop at nothing to get his wish of unbelievable power and/or control. You also have a voice in your head explaining everything and giving you GPS directions. The game did also let you have the ability to inspect your weapons and read a little bit of lore in the weapon as well. From what I saw, it shows a little paragraph explaining what the weapon's made of, or where the materials come from, or maybe like who it was used by or something. Another cool thing I can say about the story is that because the game is using Unreal Engine 5, the cutscenes were all in-engine and looked gorgeous. What that means is that they don't have to hire some third-party studio to do these big fancy CGI trailers for them or anything, because the engine already has those tools built in. So all in all, the game has a good chance of containing a story you might not want to spam the skip button through, and might actually have some cool backstory and lore.
To banish the darkness once and for all.
So now that we've covered the basics of the game, let's talk about how the game feels. As of the beta that we had on October 20th through the 27th, the game in my opinion felt like it had extreme potential. The weapons felt pretty good, but not Destiny good. Kind of like Outriders level, just without the crazy mods that you can put on your guns. I actually could see the final gunplay feeling very similar to how The Division feels with its gunplay. You did have a wide variety of weapons to choose from, and finding a new weapon did achieve a level of excitement because it could be even better than the weapon that you were already using. It was kind of fun to experiment with new weapons. Although, there was one weird thing to get used to in the game, which is how they do the rarity system of items. It's very different from any other looter shooter that I've actually played. So typically in looter shooters you have the white, green, blue, purple, and gold rarities, but in the beta for the first Descendant, we only saw Tier 1 weapons, which are blue, and Tier 2 weapons, which are purple. We did confirm that the gold Tier 3 weapons do exist in the game, but they were not featured in this beta, so we don't really know what kind of cool stuff they will offer. so the rarity system will take a little bit of time to get used to and might even change in the full version. But I will say that it was impressive how many guns were in this game. You had multiple types of weapons, and then multiple weapons in each of those categories as well. There was enough variety in the weapons that in the beta alone I probably found 2 or 3 different weapons for each category, some blue tier 1 and some purple tier 2s. But the way that you customize your gunplay and weapons isn't by putting mods on your guns like Outriders, and not like randomly rolled perks like you get on Destiny as well. The sense of randomization comes from the blue stat numbers that you get at the bottom of tier 1 and tier 2 guns. These stats can add extra damage, and or add like extra critical damage to your weapon, or add extra elemental damage to your weapon like ice or fire damage. But they can also be a detriment to your weapons as well, with stats like minus 20% fire rate. So now for the classes, the skills that you could use on your classes felt good. My friends and I all played different classes and experimented with unlocking nuances as the beta went on. I ended up unlocking about 8 of the classes that they offered and played a little bit of each, but my favorite one was Sharon. She is very similar to the Outrider's Trickster class, and that's pretty much why I picked her. Her skills included an energy blade that could swipe horizontally and do massive damage, an active camo ability that turned you invisible for 25 seconds, a stun bomb that would disable all enemy movement for about 5 seconds, and her 4th ability was a crazy awesome like blade barrage thing that could target up to 10 enemies, shooting blades at each of them. So it could do insane damage to anything in your path, and allowed Sharon to either be a single target damage beast or a crowd clearing monstrosity, especially with some of the runes that you can get later in the game, which I'll touch on more in a little bit. So each character also has a passive ability that works for the character as a whole, and for Sharon, her passive was in 2 parts. The first part said that any enemy that wasn't actively targeting her took 8% more damage. And the second part says that after your invisibility ends, you have 3 seconds where your damage is increased by 140% for the first hit, allowing you to inflict unbelievable damage. Combining it all together felt very satisfying, and the same could be said for all the other classes that I tested as well. The skills synergized with your passive abilities very nicely, and there was only a few things that I felt that could be better about certain classes or certain abilities, but I will touch on those maybe in a separate video where I give more critical feedback of the game. Alright, so now for world design. I would say that the world design of the beta was great. The environments were big and beautiful and gorgeous, and they really flexed the power of the Unreal Engine. In the beta, we had a total of 3 areas to explore outside of the main social hub or tower. The first area that you visit is called Kingston, an old-fashioned cobblestone road type of town with big churches and courtyards. The second area was the Albany Mountains, which has lots of thick fog, pine trees, and various types of architecture and scenery. And the third area was called the Red Desert. This area looked actually really freaking great, with rocky cliffs and sand dunes. But the big issue with the world design, though, is that there was no fast traversal method in the game, so you have these big open areas, but you don't have a vehicle like in Destiny to zoom around on, and you can't fly around like you could in Anthem. To add to that, there were no enemies in the world outside of the rare pocket of 3 that you could find here or there. So unless you were in a mission, the enemies would just be gone, and the world felt super empty. There was no reason to explore these big giant castle buildings or cool caverns because there was no lore excerpts or collectibles to find. There were no animals or beasts running around the world, no NPCs, and no hidden loot chests or puzzles either. So I would say that's one of my biggest hopeful changes for the final game, is the world. But we will more than likely see more areas to explore in the final game just based off of the map. In the map you saw the 3 areas in the beta, but then there were also like 5 other zones that were locked as well. So this means that the max player level could be really high in the final game, whereas in the beta we were capped at level 40, but we also had double XP to help with the leveling process. And speaking of player progression, let's talk about what you will be grinding for and how you can change your character to be more unique in the first Descendant as well. So in the game you have a system called runes, which are very similar to Warframe's mods. With runes you can equip them to give your weapons or Descendants a stat boost. You can boost things like attack values, fire rate, or even things like cooldown reductions or skill attack damage. But each rune has a capacity cost to it, so you can only equip a certain number of runes before you reach capacity. And while you can upgrade your runes to make the effects more potent, it increases the capacity cost that it takes to slot the rune in. So for example, if you only have 50 capacity, you could fit 5 different runes in with 10 capacity each. You can reduce the cost it takes to slot the rune in by selecting the socket types for each rune slot. And then if you insert a matching rune of that same type, it cuts the rune cost in half, allowing you to upgrade your runes even further without reaching maximum capacity. You can tell it's matching by the symbol turning green. Symbol turning red actually means it's in the wrong socket type and will increase the value by like a few points, so it'll go from 10 to like 13. And in the beta, we saw tier 1 blues, tier 2 purples, and tier 3 gold runes as well, such as the rune that increases your attack by a % amount each time that you rolled. We saw other runes that gave immunity to certain elements, such as freeze immunity or fire immunity as well, but they made you take about 30% more damage from other elements. So these runes, I believe, are designed to be used more during specific boss fights, which we will also cover in just a little bit. But my personal favorite rune was the Veteran's Tactics rune. It gave you a base 10% chance on each kill to reset your longest skill cooldown, but could be upgraded to 20% chance per kill. So as you killed a massive wave of enemies, you have a really high chance of resetting your skill's cooldown. So with Sharon's Blade Barrage skill, or even with the energy swipe that I have too, I could sit there and just wipe enemies instantly back to back to back. And like I mentioned earlier, you are able to upgrade your runes so they offer bigger stat increases, but it does cost a lot. In the beta, trying to grind for different currencies or materials like gold or Kulapothium was pretty much the major grind that we saw. You could acquire gold by selling weapons, beating bosses, or from world drops, but Kulapothium was only acquired from dismantling any excess runes that you had. For example, towards the end of the beta, I had almost 200% extra skill attack bonus damage because I had 3 or 4 maxed out runes for skill attack. So my energy blade and blade barrage abilities hit for ungodly high damage numbers, and I became the DPS character for my group. But as you would expect, because I focused all of my currencies on skill attack and my weapons, I had the durability of wet paper, and I needed our trusty Ajax tank with 17,000 health to revive my cheeks about every 10 seconds. So runes could definitely be extremely cool if they give us runes that offer like fundamental changes to some class skills and not just a higher stat boost. But now, let's dive into how the bosses worked, and one of the possible endgame grinds that we may see in the full game. So in the beta, we tried the Void Intercept battles. These battles are where the biggest bad guys are. But unlike prison, you can't just walk up to the biggest bad guy in the yard and punch him in the face. You first had to complete certain story missions to unlock the ability to fight these bosses. Or for the hard mode bosses, you had to beat the previous boss in the lineup before fighting the next one, which I thought was really cool. Because then you couldn't really just like matchmake with some random level 2 guy who just dies when the boss farts on him.
Yeah, stand on top of him and fucking shoot you right in the tank.
And then he just farted on me and killed me.
Ads on my side are down.
You have to actually progress the game to attempt the harder content. Although each boss did look really cool and had its own sort of uniqueness to it. And even though there were some reskinned bosses, even the reskinned ones didn't act exactly like the previous ones. Some bosses had actual mechanics that you had to learn, especially as you got to the later hard mode bosses. Bosses like Deadbride, for example, had an immunity phase where you saw that whenever you saw that she was immune, you had to Forrest Gump sprint away from her, because if you didn't, she would summon a massive dome around her that would do so much damage that even our 17,000 Ajax tank would get clapped within seconds.
Oh, fuck.
She's just over. She's on me.
I'm so dead. I'm so dead. Oh.
I'm away from her.
Oh.
Jay, we were right next to
guys. You got 2 minutes. I'm.
I don't know. Did she not do it? Oh, there.
That is terrifying.
It's really cool from out here.
I'm way out.
I'm outside the circle.
She's on me.
On the other side of the map.
She's on me. But you were able to prevent this mechanic or cancel it early if you focused on these crystals around her gun. Or Pyromaniac and his ability to turn the entire map into a "this is fine" meme within mere seconds. Or the Eye of Sauron mechanic that Stunning Beauty possessed, where if you were in line of sight of the giant eyeball above her, it would slowly tick you with massive damage until you hit. But the only way to get rid of the eyeball was to shoot it, so you had to be very careful in peeking out to shoot it. And each boss did have its own critical hit spots that let you do increased damage. These were actually super duper cool because you could weaken the crit spot and then use your grappling hook to pull yourself onto the weak spot and punch it and then tear it off, which would then stagger the boss and leave him open for your entire team to do massive damage. The only downside was that for classes who did not focus on gun damage or did not use medium or long range weapons, you had a really hard time hitting most of the crit spots. Like for me playing as Sharon, this is where I found most of my trouble as well. I could hit the boss with my energy blade and my blade barrage and do great damage, but most bosses, like the walker bosses that were giant spider crab mechs, had immunity phases where the only damageable spot were these tiny little crit points on their knees, and you had to break all of them to end the immunity phase. So during those phases, I could only kind of help with my shotgun, so I felt kind of useless. So all in all, the visuals of the bosses give me pretty good hope actually for the future of the final release. They were all super tall and covered in flames or toxic, which is where the immunity runes are useful. Useful? They were all super tall or covered in flames or ice or toxic, which is where the immunity runes are useful. And the bosses were all really satisfying to finally kill after a few attempts.
Got it.
I got
Alright,
him.
now he's taking.
I got him! I got him
Oh
as we
my
went down.
God.
Oh!
Hell yeah.
Oh my god.
God. What a job. Let's pick up our loot, boys, because we earned it.
There's only one
That
left.
was amazing.
Right?
Okay, so as we get closer to the end of the video, I want to cover one last topic, which I think will be very important to most people, and that is matchmaking. So the first Descendant does feature various levels of matchmaking, some good and some bad. You have the option of making your party private or public, but only from the map screen in the tower. If you select public, you will load into a public party that is already in that zone. If those players start a mission, you can join that mission and it teleports you to the other players, no matter how far in the mission they are. They don't give you the option to start a new mission or a new instance of that mission just for you. So you end up missing XP and loot because it just skips a portion of that mission. Which could be good if you're just trying to speedrun the missions, I guess, but I'd prefer the loot and XP. Now, like I said though, you can start a new private party, but you can only do this by going back to the tower, going back to the map, and changing your party privacy to private, so that way you have the entire map to yourself when you load into the new zone. You can invite your friends to your party, but once again you have to go back to the tower to invite them and then re-travel back to the same area that you were just at. And let's say you want to do a horde mode event in the world. Other players can join you by shooting the enemies around you, or manually joining from the beacon. But it gets really weird when you and a buddy want to do your own missions together, but the other two random people in your party are doing other missions already. So the party system could use a pretty major overhaul in my opinion to be in line with other games in this genre when it comes to exploring the open areas and doing missions and stuff. But you are able to matchmake for all of the Void Intercept battles as well. However, in the future I would love to see a solo option so that way you don't need to try to search for 200 seconds to find a party if you're just farming some level 20 boss for materials. You will actually spend more time matchmaking for a full squad than you will actually fighting the boss. But hey, at least those of us without friends will never go in alone. The other super cool thing that the first Descendant does that even games like Destiny never added for the longest time was the ability to invite someone to your squad and not make them re-instance to join you. So when you look at someone in this game, you see the party invite option. And if you accept the invite, then their name turns blue, and ta-da, they're in your party. It's super clean and simple. I love it. Alright, so before this video gets too long, I will just recap by saying that this game has extreme potential here, and if they do it right, it could be very, very successful. The developers gave my friends and I major green flags in the amount of times that they did server maintenance to keep the server stable, or even added little patches here and there for bug fixing, performance optimization, or even doing super fast character fixes for all the broken characters. It seems like they truly care, and this was just from a beta. The official release window is stated for sometime in 2023, we do not have an official date just yet. But if you guys want me to cover more on this game, do let me know with a comment down below, a like on the video, and subscribe to my channel if you're new. But, once again guys, thank you so much for making it this far in the video. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you guys all have a fantastic day, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye guys!